A case my team took on, one that was unlike any investigation I had ever worked before. It all began with a human skull, discovered deep within a bamboo forest. October 27th, 2010. We received a call shortly after lunch. A group of young backpackers, or adventure seekers, a trend that had been growing recently, discovered something horrifying deep within the thick bamboo forest in Green Hollow, a rural area near Lloydtown, Arizona. This group loved exploring unknown, untouched places. But this time, in this seemingly peaceful bamboo forest, they stumbled upon something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Hidden under a thick layer of bamboo leaves, they found something unusual. One brave youth, a guy named Eric, used a stick to poke through the leaves, and what they uncovered was a human skull, white, bare, staring. There were screams, panicked footsteps scattering in all directions. Some ran while screaming. Some were so terrified their legs gave out, paralyzed at the sight. It took them a long while to compose themselves enough to call the police. When we arrived, our team immediately sealed off the area and began initial investigative procedures. We discovered that it wasn't just a skull, but a complete human skeleton buried shallowly beneath the bamboo leaves. Local residents told us this bamboo forest had a grim history. During wartime, it was a site of executions. They called it a mass grave, and it was said there were many anonymous graves scattered around. Our initial hypothesis was that the remains could belong to a forgotten wartime victim. However, the preliminary forensic examination told a different story. Based on bone analysis, the forensic doctor estimated that the remains were those of a female, aged 40 to 45. The most alarming discovery was 4 distinct blunt force trauma wounds on the skull, all at critical points. With our experience, we immediately suspected foul play. The murder weapon was likely a blunt cylindrical object, possibly a hammer. Next question: how long had the body been there? Given the humid, warm climate and the shallow burial, decomposition would have progressed quickly. Forensic experts estimated the time of death to be approximately 6 months ago. Another important clue: the upper body still wore a t-shirt and bra, but the lower half was naked, only socks remained. With just the skeleton left, finding biological evidence like hair or skin was incredibly difficult. One thing stood out: why was the body buried so shallowly? If the killer had strength or help, why not bury deeper to better hide the body? From our observations, it seemed the burial had been done hastily. This could mean the first crime scene was exactly where the body was found, which would increase the chances of the perpetrator leaving traces. We expanded the search radius, hoping to find clues about the victim's identity or the killer's. In the initial search, we found only one broken comb, half of it, near the scene. No other crucial evidence. As you know, in any criminal investigation, identifying the victim is critical. But how could we determine the identity of a woman when all we had was her skeleton? The forensic team extracted DNA from her bones and cross-checked it against the National DNA Database. However, at that time, the database only included profiles of criminals. If the person had no criminal record, there would be no match. We also combed through missing persons reports, but no one matched the description based on the skeletal features. From the half-broken comb, the t-shirt, bra, and socks, we could only deduce that these were common, inexpensive items, the kind used by women of modest means. Nothing distinctive enough to easily identify her. At this point, the case hit a wall. Were we going to give up? No. The whole investigative team sat down to review every detail from the beginning. We noticed something odd. When the woman entered the bamboo forest, she must have been fully dressed, right? So why were her pants and shoes missing now? And where was the other half of the comb? We decided to expand the search area beyond the initial site. Late autumn had arrived. Thick weeds had grown taller than a man's waist, making the search even more grueling. Still, we pressed on. 3 days later, on a small rugged path not far from the original site, we found it. The missing half of the comb. The small path, though rough and winding, seemed like it could serve as an escape route out of the forest. Our theory was that the suspect had fled along this path, and during the rush, either dropped or deliberately discarded the comb. From there, we mapped out a 1-kilometer radius for investigation. Most directions led nowhere, but one path, ending near a small hill, provided a critical breakthrough. There, an officer found a septic tank, exposed like many rural ones tend to be. We asked the nearby homeowner if they had noticed anything strange around the time of the incident. At first, the man said no, but after thinking for a while, he recalled. About 6 months ago, he had noticed a pair of pants floating in the septic tank. Immediately, we inspected the tank, and as expected, we found a pair of women's pants. Inside the pants pocket, we retrieved a badly water-damaged SIM card. Using advanced technology, our forensic techs worked tirelessly to recover data from it. Finally, we got a lead. The phone number linked to the SIM card belonged to Rachel Lynn, 41 years old, an age perfectly consistent with the forensic estimation, 40 to 45 years. Although we had found the SIM card's owner, we still needed to confirm that the skeleton truly belonged to Rachel Lynn. We located her parents, collected DNA samples, and compared them. The result? A perfect match. The skeletal remains belonged to Rachel Lynn. Rachel Lynn's family lived in Franklin County, about 200 kilometers from the bamboo forest in Maple Ridge where the body was found. Although Franklin County and Maple Ridge both fell under the broader jurisdiction of Washington state, the distance between them was significant. Her elderly parents told us. Rachel had married and moved away over 20 years ago. Because of the distance and poor transportation, she seldom visited, only occasionally calling home. According to her family, Rachel lived with her husband and 3 children in a small town near Maple Ridge, only about 30 minutes drive from the crime scene. We immediately went to her home to question her husband, Matthew Chun, 43 years old, a factory worker in Maple Ridge. Matthew Chun had been married to Rachel Lynn for 20 years, and together they had 3 children. But a major red flag popped up. Rachel had been missing for 6 months, yet Matthew had never reported it to the police. Why? When asked, Matthew claimed that although they hadn't officially divorced, he and Rachel had been separated for some time, waiting for divorce proceedings. When Rachel disappeared, he said he went to her factory looking for her, but the factory simply told him that Rachel had quit without notice. Matthew even kept a notebook documenting every time he visited the factory looking for her. Why hadn't he reported her missing? Because Rachel had allegedly left 2 notes, stuck to their front door, explaining her departure. The first note appeared right after Rachel's disappearance. "Kids, Mommy's going away for work. Don't look for me." The second note showed up in July. "I've returned, but am now traveling to California with my boss. Don't bother trying to find me." Matthew said that he assumed Rachel had left with a lover. Since they were already separated, he believed it was her choice, and he didn't feel the need to report it. He also submitted the notebook and the 2 notes as evidence. It almost looked like he had carefully prepared for this encounter with law enforcement. Too carefully. Although we documented his statement, we kept Matthew Chun under close watch. Further investigation revealed an important detail. Matthew Chun had a habit of keeping daily journals, dozens of notebooks spanning years. Handwriting analysis showed that the 2 notes from Rachel were indeed written by the same person. But crucially, the handwriting did not match Rachel Lynn's. Moreover, forensic dating suggested that the second note, supposedly written in July, appeared after Rachel's estimated time of death, around late May. The letters were fabricated. Someone wanted to create the illusion that Rachel Lynn was still alive, misleading both the family and the police. When we compared samples, we confirmed the forged notes were not written by Matthew Chun either. Thus, for the time being, we suspended suspicions against him, but continued monitoring his activities closely. At the same time, based on signs suggesting the victim had engaged in sexual activity shortly before death, we suspected the case involved a love entanglement. We contacted the telecommunications provider and requested a detailed call history for Rachel Lynn. Among the frequent contacts, one number stood out. It belonged to someone registered under the name Daniel Huang. However, deeper checking revealed that the Daniel Huang identity was fake. The SIM card had been registered using a forged ID. We couldn't yet determine who Daniel Huang truly was. Refusing to give up, we dug deeper. Cross-referencing Daniel Huang's contacts, we found a woman named Nina Dean, 41 years old, the same age range as Rachel. And one more important fact, Nina Dean worked at the same factory as Rachel Lynn. We dug into Nina Dean's background and uncovered a tangled web of secrets. Nina Dean wasn't just Rachel's colleague. She was also Matthew Chen's mistress. Whenever Matthew and Rachel worked overtime, and Nina wasn't on shift, Rachel would often ask Nina to babysit their kids. Over time, the relationship between Matthew and Nina deepened, and eventually, it turned into a full-blown affair. When Rachel found out, furious confrontations erupted. Separations soon followed. Ironically, at the very time we were investigating the case, Matthew and Nina were still seeing each other. That's why Matthew Chen had initially hidden the real reason behind their marital separation. He didn't want us snooping too much into Nina Dean. At this point, the case became complex, but one thing was clear. Motive for murder was emerging from multiple sides. Rachel Lynn's discovery of the affair, the betrayal, the tangled relationships, the anger, all were threads leading to the truth. When we brought Nina Dean in for questioning, new shocking details emerged. Nina admitted that the mysterious Daniel Huang, the one who frequently contacted Rachel Lynn, was actually Victor Wong, a 65-year-old former supervisor at the factory where both women had worked. Victor Wong had used a fake identity and ID card to buy the SIM card, attempting to cover his tracks. But the most chilling part of Nina's confession was this. She revealed that Victor Wong was the one who murdered Rachel Lynn. Immediately, we launched a manhunt for Victor Wong. However, he had already disappeared from the area 6 months ago, right around the time of Rachel's death. Digging into Victor's background, we discovered a disturbing pattern. Although he had a wife and grown children living abroad, he had long been known as a lecherous man at the factory. He frequently harassed female workers and was rumored to have had multiple inappropriate relationships. Most women, due to financial hardships or fear of retaliation, had chosen to endure rather than report him. Now, with Victor missing, our suspicions only grew. After an intense search lasting several weeks, we finally captured Victor Wong, hiding out in a rural town in Oregon. When arrested, Victor initially tried to deny everything, but under mounting evidence and interrogation pressure, he confessed. He had lured Rachel Lynn to the bamboo forest and murdered her. But a new question loomed large. How could a 65-year-old man overpower and kill a healthy middle-aged woman? The answer lay in an even more sordid twist. During interrogation, Victor admitted he and Rachel Lynn had been lovers. Their relationship had started during Rachel's separation from her husband, Matthew Chen. Heartbroken by betrayal and desperate for comfort, Rachel had gotten involved with Victor, completely unaware that Victor was also sleeping with Nina Dean at the same time. The situation was grotesque. Rachel's husband, Matthew, was having an affair with Nina Dean. Nina Dean was sleeping with Victor Wong. Victor Wong was involved with Rachel Lynn. A 4-person love quadrangle, tangled beyond belief. Over time, Rachel became increasingly furious at Nina Dean. Every time she met Victor, she would vent her anger, cursing Nina bitterly. Unbeknownst to Rachel, Victor would report every insult back to Nina. The hatred between Rachel and Nina grew exponentially. Finally, in a moment of cold-hearted malice, Nina Dean made a deadly proposition to Victor Wong. If you want to keep sleeping with me, you need to get rid of Rachel. At first, Victor refused, but after repeated coercion, he eventually agreed to murder Rachel Lynn. A horrifying decision. The fateful day came. May 24th, 2010. Victor lured Rachel to the Maple Ridge bamboo forest, promising her a special surprise. She thought it would be a romantic gesture. Instead, Victor had hidden a hammer under his clothes. After a brief staged encounter, he suddenly pulled out the hammer and smashed Rachel's skull, killing her on the spot. Afterward, he hastily buried her shallowly under bamboo, leaves, and branches. Victor used Rachel's pants to wrap the hammer, her cell phone, and her comb. On his way home, the comb accidentally broke and half of it dropped along a trail. One crucial piece of evidence we later found. When passing by an open sewage tank, Victor dumped the pants and phone into it. He then threw the hammer and Rachel's shoes into a nearby creek, both of which were later recovered by the police. The 2 letters left on the front door? Those were fabricated by Victor, using his own handwriting to mislead everyone into thinking Rachel was still alive and had willingly run away. The truth was finally laid bare. In April 2012, Victor Wong was sentenced to death for first-degree murder. As for Nina Dean, she was convicted as an accessory for inciting murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. along with an order to pay restitution to Rachel's family. So my question, Nina didn't directly kill anyone. Should she be punished so harshly? But under criminal law, inciting another person to commit a crime constitutes complicity. Nina's malicious instigation directly led to Rachel Lynn's death. Thus, her punishment was fully justified. In this tragedy, Matthew Chun and Nina Dean's betrayals lit the fuse. Rachel Lynn's impulsive affair escalated the situation. Victor Wong's lust and cruelty sealed her fate. A poisonous web of deceit, infidelity, and selfishness destroyed 4 lives and left a trail of devastation for their families. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't need a crowd. Just 3 people are enough to destroy a life. Here, it only took 4.